Welcome to all of it. We got all of it.
All of it. All of it.
Our guest is Secretary Madeleine Albright, Bryan Cranston, Tank and the Bangas, Barry Jenkins, Celia Keenan-Bolger, Aaron Lee Carr, Esperanza Spalding, Gideon Glick, Helen Yoyemi, Fab Five Freddy, Benga Akanabe, Brene Brown, Tony Goldwyn, Tandy Newton, Jake Gyllenhaal. Welcome to all of it. Thank you so much for joining us. Hello.
What a pleasure.
Hi. This is so fun.
I'll see you tomorrow.
We're here every day, 12 to 2. Impromptu concert.
I love it.
I love it.
I was there for the love of it.
You must tell the truth.
I'm sure everyone's perspective is unique.
There's a lot of truth about the pain of being an immigrant, but they're jokes. We find the funny.
It's our strength.
At what point do you think women's health care will stop being a political issue?
When half of Congress can get pregnant.
Ran out of words, but we do what we do. We don't have no board, so we got to trade twos.
So we trade twos. I was this really dope groove, and Allison was so nice to meet you.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our October Get Lit with All of It virtual book club event with Raven Leilani, the author of Luster. If you're one of our first timers, welcome to our book club. Let me introduce myself. I'm Alison Stewart. I host the WNYC radio show, All of It with Alison Stewart. Weekdays, 12 to 2, we're live. You can also listen to us via podcast. What else can I tell you? You need to follow us on Instagram at All of It WNYC, because that's where we actually hold all of our book club discussions in between these live events. It's a really good time. We put polls up there. You get information early at All of It WNYC. I want to thank the folks at the New York Public Library, because without them, we really couldn't. It was really great. They came to us during the pandemic and said, let's partner, let's try to make community here. Let's try to give people a night out in. So they've been able to make all of these e-copies of these books available to you. And we know that 3,810 of you were able to borrow a free e-copy of Luster to read along with us. So here's the plan for the next hour. Stop doom scrolling. You're just supposed to not look at the news right now. Just have a really good time with us. We're going to talk to Raven in just a little bit. You're going to get a chance to ask her questions. So think of your questions. Our theme tonight was debuts, because this was Raven's debut. So we're going to introduce you to an artist who's about to have her debut album. She's fantastic. Her name is Jensen McRae. She has given us 2 different performances we're going to check out, and we're going to talk to Jensen. And then stick around at the end of the show, because we will announce our November book. A couple words for you Pulitzer Prize finalist. How about that? That's what they call a tease. But first, let's have a drink. You know, when we used to do these events live before the pandemic, we always had a bar and wine, and we kind of wanted to keep in that spirit, especially with this book, Luster. I mean, who doesn't want to have a cocktail and read a book like Luster? So we thought we would invite one of our favorite bartenders. Yes, our show has a favorite bartender. That's Ivy Mix, and she agreed to join us tonight. Ivy's the real deal. She was named American Bartender of the Year by the U.S. Bartenders Guild in 2015. She is co-owner of Leanda in Brooklyn, a James Beard Award-nominated cocktail bar in Carroll Gardens, and the author of her own book called Spirits of Latin America, a celebration of culture and cocktails with 100 recipes from Leanda and beyond. So if you follow us on social media, you know that Ivy created a cocktail for this show based on this book. So here are some of the ingredients you're going to need if you haven't done it already. You're going to need some rye whiskey, cognac, Campari, some simple syrup, and some limes and ice as well. And without further ado, let's welcome Ivy Mix. Hi, Ivy.
Hey, Allison, how are you?
I am doing great. We're so excited. We've already had people tweeting us pictures of their cocktails, so people love this idea.
I love it.
When you are crafting a new cocktail, how does it start? Do you start with the liquor? Do you start with a flavor you're going for?
Yeah, I mean, usually when I create cocktails, I usually start with the spirit itself, and I taste it, and I go through what I taste in that certain alcohol or liquor. But with this cocktail, I really kind of dove into the book and tried to take my inspiration from there. And like any art form, in writing, like this book, you're putting ideas into words that then are translated into thoughts. And with cocktails or food or anything culinary, we're just trying to put flavors to words and thoughts. So that was the idea here.
All right. So you read Luster.
Yes.
And tell me about how you decided to make this cocktail.
Yeah. So first of all, Luster just spoke to me on so many different levels. I also spent my early 20s living in Bushwick and Brooklyn, and I just think it's a really beautiful debut novel. So what I really want to do with this cocktail is I tried to assign different flavors and ideas to the different characters and kind of the plot of the book. So without doing a spoiler, the rye whiskey to me is very Brooklyn, very kind of young Brooklyn. I don't want to say hipster, but this type of person who's like, because rye whiskey is really tasty, but it's also relatively inexpensive. Word to the wise for anyone who's out there, you can just drink it and it's really good. And I wanted to pair that with something that was a little bit autumnal because it's the season that we're in, and also something that's a little bit older. And we're going to the fall season at Leyenda. Lots of our cocktails have cognac in them. So I was like, oh, I want to, rather than just doing, straight rye whiskey, let's try to give kind of the other nuance of these stories, kind of like the battle between old and young, these different nuances. So rye whiskey and cognac. And then Campari is in there as this bitter component, kind of this to me, that's the tension within the book, which I love. And then I muddle up some lime and some sugar, pretty much to balance out the drink. But when you muddle lime, you get all that pith, and it also kind of aids the bitterness, but the sweetness of the juice ties all the ingredients together.
All right, so you're gonna make it. I'm gonna try to follow. I did a little pre-mixing here, and this we're not sure how this is gonna go. Okay.
Great. So it's yeah. So it's pretty easy. I'm just gonna kind of put this together really quick for you. So what I'm gonna do is just muddle up a quarter of a lime. So you just kind of take a lime, muddle it, put all the.
I did that. I got my limes in there. I did that.
You did it.
I pre-muddled.
Good. And then I'm just gonna do you can really, I know I say simple syrup, but when you muddle with sugar, it's really easy. Simple syrup is called simple syrup because it's simple to make. It's equal parts sugar and water. Don't buy it in the grocery store. Just make it yourself. It's super easy. I was gonna make some, but I think what I'm gonna do is I'm actually just gonna put like a teaspoon of sugar into my drink, because with the shake and everything, it'll be just fine. There you go. And then we're going to do 1.5 ounces of rye whiskey.
Oop, I've got my rye. I don't know if I did it. Is that a little heavy?
You know what? We've got 6 days until the election, so I think heavy's okay.
There you go.
I think he's okay. And plus, that's supposed to be Eddie, so that's the main player here, right? The rye was the main player. And then we're doing 1/2 ounce of the cognac.
All right, I did a whole pre-mix situation here.
Good, go for it.
All right, so I hope that was okay. Does the order matter?
No, doesn't matter.
Not really? Okay. Oops, I left a little sugar behind. Never leave sugar behind. Never leave a man behind.
Right, yeah. Good. And then you do 1/2 ounce of Campari.
Okay, I'm in there.
It's funny because just getting ready for this, to record this, I was looking up, just taking notes, cliff notes online. Okay, I remember this. And I looked up the book on Wikipedia, and it was saying that, and it's interesting. I didn't think about it, but it was interesting to have Eddie be a flaneur, which is a phrase that I learned when I was in college from the Borges essay, which means a wanderer, but it's kind of an untranslatable word from French. And I think that this cocktail, it's kind of after the fact, but it kind of makes sense for this cocktail as well, because it's Italy, France, and America or Kentucky. And I just like the idea of the flaneur. So I think Luster flaneur is a good name for the drink.
Okay, wait a minute. I lost a step. Ice?
Ice, yes.
Okay. I was lost in your words about the flaneur.
Put your cap on. You shake. You put the little cap on top. I'm shaking mine in a ball jar because
like it.
those are great, but I don't like doing dishes. When I make drinks at home, I shake in a ball jar, I just open it up, and then I've got a cocktail.
All right. So how long do we shake?
About 10 seconds. Just make sure you put your hand on the top. Yeah, exactly. All right. Good.
Okay.
Great. And then,
all right.
Do you have a glass?
I do. Okay. So just pour it in, or do I want the ice?
You can kind of take off the big top.
Yeah. Maybe.
Sometimes
it'll come off.
Yep, no.
It's not coming off.
Just strain it into the glass.
Okay, I'll just strain.
And it should be pink because of the Campari. I don't
know.
I was trying to do the research on who designed the book cover because I think the book cover is so spot on.
Oh, you were going for the color of the book cover.
I mean, kind of, but it's hard to do because it's so magnetic and it's so disco. But it was kind of the idea. But yeah. Anyway, that's it.
Cheers. Cheers to you. Cheers to Raven.
Yeah.
Oh, that's delicious.
Super tasty. And really
I got to put this down because I still have to interview Raven. But before I let you go, I do have I want to ask you a serious question because obviously businesses like yours, restaurants, tough times right now during the pandemic. And I know you've been really, really involved with the Independent Restaurant Coalition, trying to find ways to help businesses. And you've been really advocating for the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. It got folded into the HEROES Act, which is now stalled. What's at stake for your places like your bar, Leanda?
Yeah, so I think that to give a quick little answer to a huge question is that the important thing about the Independence Restaurant Coalition is that we're focusing on the independent. So people who don't have a chain, they don't have massive backers, they don't have, they're not openly traded, all these things. And restaurants and bars like mine, we are in danger of closing forever. And a show like yours is so amazing because you celebrate culture, whether it be literary culture, musical culture, food culture, whatever. And people should recognize that we're in danger of losing food and drink culture. Your favorite local that you like to go get a cocktail at, we're running at 20 to 70% of what we normally run at. So the Restaurants Act, which was brought forward by the Independent Restaurant Coalition, is essentially asking, now the Senate already passed the House, but now asking the Senate to just give us something to survive because winter is coming. It doesn't matter if you're in New York City, which is bad, but even if you're in the south of Florida, winter after December, when the holidays are here, equal low sales or horrible weather and low turnout. So we're really in need of an act to get passed. And I encourage everyone to call up your senator and say, pass the Restaurants Act, because we need it.
You should check out Leanda on Smith Street. You should also check out Ivy's book, Spirits of Latin America. Ivy, thank you so much for making this cocktail, which I'm going to hold on to. I can't really drink it until we get well into the show because it tastes so good. And, Ivy, cheers to you.
Cheers.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Okay, one sip. Just one more. Let's get to our main event, shall we? The New York Times said Luster is so delicious it feels illicit. The New Yorker calls the novel mordant and bruising. One of our readers, Alison Vega, tweeted to say simply, "It's so good." Luster has been nominated for the Center for Fiction's First Novel Prize. It was recently longlisted for the Andrew Carnegie Medal for Excellence in Fiction by the American Library Association. We are so excited to be joined by its author, Raven Leilani. Hi, Raven.
Hi, thank you for having me. This is a real honor. And watching the segment before this was really incredible. Hearing Ivy talk about how she thought about putting the components into the drink, it's perfect. It's incredible. Thank you so much for that.
When did you start writing this book?
Oh boy, I started writing this book the second year in my MFA. I had come back to New York to pursue my MFA in creative writing, and I'd come in with an entirely different book that wasn't really working. And I had to kind of face up to that. And I'm glad I did, because I started this book and it just felt different. It felt urgent. And I pretty much spent that tail end of my MFA kind of just trying to finish this up.
What was it that made you realize, that's interesting, you said you were fighting it at first. What was the turning point?
Oh man. So I think, the turning point for me was being in an environment where I felt I could be vulnerable enough to write something this honest and this unvarnished. I think before, when I was trying to write the previous writing projects I had, I was a little timid on the page. And I think that's natural, to want to protect yourself, to want to hide behind your prose. But I had some really necessary conversations, and what I was writing about felt urgent enough where I wanted to lift the veil and write in the most honest way I could.
Well, you can't hide anymore because everybody is reading this book. Everyone is reading this book. And now that you've been out doing Zoom, engagements and book events, what has been a question that has surprised you from your readers?
I think what has surprised me about the response to the book has honestly been the fact that people seem to be taken aback by how intently I wrote toward discomfort. So it kind of is what we were just talking about, where that shift that had to happen for me to write this book, where I sat down and felt like I couldn't write or start a project where I was hiding, is the thing that seems to resonate most with the readers I've spoken to, where I felt it was my mission to talk about the parts that are uncomfortable, the parts that are awkward, the parts that are human. And I suppose that surprised me, that has kept coming up, but in a good way.
Let's dig into the characters a little bit. Edie, you told the New York Times, I wanted to write about a Black woman who fails a lot.
Yes.
Why did you want to write about a Black woman who fails a lot?
Well, because I'm a Black woman who fails a lot. I could start there.
I'm going to raise my hand too. I'm in that close.
But I really felt that to afford a Black woman on the page the latitude to make mistakes, to be hurt, to not bear pain well, was a valuable thing. Because I think that Black women especially are held to this standard of stoicism, of bearing adversity well, and being kind of that being deemed virtuous. And I think that expectation empties a person of their humanity. It denies them the right to feel. And so I wanted, in this fictional context, to afford this Black woman the right to be fallible. And I think, that real estate has been populated by many white men, right? They're allowed to be fallible. They're allowed to be extremely unlikable. And I thought, I wanted to write the story that I knew personally.
What is something in the book where you think that Edie is actually a success, even though maybe on the surface it looks like a failure?
I would say ultimately this story is a hopeful one when it comes to what the artistic journey looks like. Mm-hmm. Because I do think this is an area where she's trying to, lay claim to the right to make art, and she's grappling with the limits of her skill and like the real restrictions around her time and means to make art, but that ultimately she finds a way to carve out time to make that private work and to sustain faith in herself enough to claim that she is an artist. I wanted that to be forward. The fact of being able to claim your artistry is you can claim that if you're doing it. And so I think where she succeeds is in the practice. That's when I think it finally becomes more of a hopeful text, I hope, which is when you get to see her really practicing. You get to see her really grappling with her medium in a way that, is a privilege, but also requires a faith in yourself in a way that I think it takes a lot of us a long time to seize that.
Now, Raven, I have been referring to Luster on the air on public radio as spicy. That's the word I just decided to go with. It was a term that I thought could convey that it was a book that involved sex without turning people off or making it public radio. You have to be careful with language and then the like.
Yes.
But and because I also thought, sex is very important to the story. It's very important in the telling of the story. The very first sentence is, the first time we have sex, we were both fully clothed at our desks during work hours, bathed in blue computer-like light. And the sex in the book is often frank. Sometimes it's unromantic. Sometimes it's awkward. When you sat down and thought about the scenes and how you wanted to write them, what is it that you wanted to accomplish with the sex scenes?
Well, in this book that is very much in a way about performance, Edie is a character who is constantly calculating and extremely hyper vigilant, and extremely, involved in the curation of herself, depending on the room that she's in. When it came to sex, I wanted that to be an area where the mask is allowed to be lowered. I wanted that to be a place where a person who is otherwise often powerless and subject to violence in a public realm, I wanted that to be a space where she could assert her sexual agency without pathology. And you're right, there are elements of that are, the awkward logistics of sex, the way it can go wrong, the miscommunications that happen in those private negotiations. But I think that to include that, to resist the temptation to pretty it up, is a more tender portrait of that kind of intimacy. And so that was important to me.
Why did Edie have sex with people in her workplace?
I will say, why is that she is trying to take pleasure where she can at a job where she is honestly not doing super meaningful work or getting compensated very well. So I think more than anything, it is a response or a sort of byproduct of the opting out that she is doing in her professional life, for a number of reasons, some that are based in sort of self-sabotage and some that are a response to a really dysfunctional and impossible professional environment. So I think that is a person taking pleasure where she can.
And there's a very interesting relationship in the work environment that has nothing to do with sex.
Yes.
It's Edie and Aria,
Yes.
another young Black woman there. And Edie has this great moment when she says, when she found me, we looked at each other the first time, finally released from our respective tokenism. I felt incredible relief. But then Edie says, I miscalculated. Too much anger shared too soon, too much. Can you believe these white people? Arias. Edie says, still rearranges herself, waiting to be chosen. And she will be, because it is an art to be Black and dogged and inoffensive. She is all of those things, and she is embarrassed that I am not. What did you want to explore in this relationship? If we can our relationship between Edie and Aria.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I wanted to explore the kind of the possibility and the real necessity of camaraderie between, Black women of color in the workplace, and what it feels like, that feeling of relief, that for Elise in this book, that brief feeling of relief when she doesn't feel as isolated and as tokenized as she has been, but the real kind of practical ramifications of working in an environment where that camaraderie is impeded by the way that environment pits Black women against each other. It's only because you understand that your margin for error is thin. And so, Aria's response to this environment is one of hyper curation. She has projected her professional avatar and will do what she can to advance. And I have, I've done that. I was sort of writing from experience, and I think a lot of Black women can say they've done that. And Edie's response is sort of more the opposite. It is more a refusal and sort of fury at the fact that she would have to maintain herself that way, and possibly the frustration that she's incapable of doing that. And so I wanted to write about what it looks like, the sort of two different tacks that two different Black women take to trying to survive in a workplace that does not afford them the grace to be fallible or fully human. And two Black women who are aware that their ability to eat, it kind of hinges on this, the maintenance of this avatar, of this mask. And so that also precludes real, genuine connection between two women who would otherwise perhaps need that kinship. So it was a really hard part to write. But again, I wanted to write toward what felt true.
Let's turn to Eric. So the story, it kicks off with this relationship between Edie and Eric, this much older white man that she meets, and he's in an open marriage. And their first date is at Six Flags. So what did you want to communicate? What did you want us to understand about them both? But their first date is at a New Jersey amusement park.
So, there is a part of me that really enjoys Six Flags, and put that in there because of that. But the beginning of the book where they meet each other, it was just a really, it was a really rich place to stage this meeting, which is the fantasy. They've been sort of interacting with each other online. They haven't actually seen each other in the flesh, but what that looks like when the fantasy comes up against the flesh and the real kind of elephant in the room between them, which is this huge age discrepancy and then huge power imbalance. So this place, Six Flags, which is a place for children, is sort of like that, that anxiety taking shape. But also it was a way to kind of move them through space in a way that felt fun and interesting, because ultimately I did, this book has a lot of dark corners, but I did want to, I wanted to write a book that felt welcoming and that was fun also.
Well, there is a lot of humor in the book. As you were writing it, did you have a sense of rhythm that you needed to have humor at certain places, or was it just part of Edie's, personality?
I think it was really just an extension of her consciousness. Once I was sort of in that register, it came organically. And even starting this book, I didn't realize that it was going to have that tenor until I was really in it. But I think Edie is, the friction between who she presents and what she's actually thinking, her rage and her want. I think the humor comes from that, and also her, hyper observational register, which I think, is partly because she's a Black woman moving through the world and needs to be studious in that way, but also part her wanting to be an artist. So she looks closely, and I think there is a certain kind of comedy that comes up from those granular details.
Everybody who is watching, we're going to take questions from you in about 10 more minutes. Raven, we have to talk about Rebecca here. So Edie loses her job. Everybody who's here watching has read the book. So, and so she gets invited to stay in Eric's and Rebecca's home. And the second half of the book, it's sort of the Rebecca-Edie relationship that comes sort of center stage. And we asked our readers whether they thought Edie was ultimately more connected to Eric or Rebecca. And 87% said she was more connected to Rebecca. Only 13% shouted out Eric on that. What is drawing these two women together?
Well, I mean, I think that's right. I'm interested about the 13. I'm curious about who they are and what they thought. But I mean, I think it could also be like my like authorial inclination in there too, which is that I am most interested in relationships between women. I find them, I think that they are complex, and in this case, Edie and Rebecca, the relationship they have is a real subversion of the expectation of what would or should exist between them. Ultimately, I think the convention would be that they would be adversaries, like sexual competitors, and that their lived experiences would preclude any real kind of kinship. But in fact, they are two both complex, both extremely serious, and Edie's always trying to like get someone to take her up on her seriousness. They're both serious women who are looking for opportunities to let down their respective masks, and I think because they're two very different experiences, that does create a kind of adversarial friction at times, but I think in a way kind of stokes an eroticism between them. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, I wanted to depict a relationship where Edie has been elsewhere searching for this affirmation of her personhood and her artistry. And she finds that challenge and that invitation to be rigorous in another woman. And I find that to be true in my own life. So I wanted to write against archetype and allow these two women to relate to each other in a way that felt messy and urgent.
We asked our readers on Instagram why they thought Rebecca allowed Edie to stay in her home. And one reader said she is trying to find a way closer to Eric and wanted to see what attraction Edie holds.
I mean, I absolutely do think, like earlier in the book, where I think Edie actually sort of asked that question, and it's more Rebecca wants to know what the big deal is. She wants to know why her husband has chosen this person, and part of that is because Rebecca is a character who is uncomfortable with unknown variables. She's a character who is very much in control and who wants to assert that dominance sort of like wherever she can, passively, aggressively. And so I think that too is why she invites her into the house in the first place, is because she sees, once Edie has walked into the house, that this is a person who is not easily controlled. And, she's already sort of negotiated the rules that this open marriage is predicated on. So her hand is all throughout this entire arrangement. And I think initially it is really that attempt to seize control, and it becomes something else later. But initially it's that.
When you were writing Aquila, the young Black girl who Eric and Rebecca have adopted, what characteristics did you want Aquila to have and why?
So, I mean, it's really tricky to write a child. Like, we've all been one, but it is really, it's tricky because you want to write it in a way where they're allowed to be children and they aren't too wizened, but at the same time, you don't want to condescend to the idea of what a child is. And so for me, it was that balance of depicting a young Black woman who also is kind of, perhaps more wizened than your average child would be, because she has experienced trauma that has aged her, but is also desperately trying to secure stability in her life. So there is that part of her character that is very kind of savvy and very wary of the threat Edie presents to her stability. But I also wanted to depict, a young woman who's becoming a young woman, like cobbling together at the idea of what her Black womanhood means to her, dealing with the drama of her body in a kind of dysfunctional way, and also a young adult who is really deeply earnest about her fandom. Like that too was really important to me, because I have a real I have a real stake and not a real bias, because I definitely was like and am a huge nerd, and so like I really wanted to write a young Black nerd who is otherwise surly and dealing with all the teenage stuff you deal with, but has a real escape hatch in the things that she loves.
You have these 4 people living under the same roof, yet they're all so isolated. They're all so lonely in different ways. What did you want to explore about isolation and loneliness within a family?
Sure. Yeah. So, I think it really is like very much a book about loneliness and the things that we try to do in order to solve that. And I think often the way that we seek out that resolution, is messy. And Edie is a perfect sort of example of that. But relative to the family unit, I think each person in that household has needs. Each person is trying to technically they're trying to make their marriage work, right? that's technically what they're trying to do. And Edie is trying to claim her art and trying to be witnessed and touched and seen. And Akila is seeking stability and also needing companionship. But I feel like the signal gets scrambled in how we feel we are able to reach out honestly and ask for that that kindness or that intimacy. I think that is the hardest thing to do, which is to be direct in asking for what you need. And in fact, I feel like the best dialogue I see or read or on TV is dialogue that is not overt, that is not direct, because in real life, how often do we actually say what we need? How often can we be vulnerable enough to say, like, this is what I need without shame? And so I think that isolation exists between this sort of, unusual family unit, despite the fact that they are all needing things, because I think it just is hard. It's hard to actually ask for what you need.
Raven, we have lots of questions and comments. This is from Ginchu. I love the voice of this book so much. It's so observant, funny, and incandescent. How did you decide to write the book in the first person from Edie's POV?
Oh boy. So I do actually remember like the first page where I was like, am I doing first person? Am I doing first person present? Okay. And I think really, I don't think I could have written it any other way, because so much of this book, of like the conflict of this book is predicated on the dissonance between that external performance and like the interior drama and candor. And so that's a real and practical problem for a lot of anyone who has to sort of present or curate themselves in a way to survive. So I think in order to depict honestly, in the most unvarnished way I could, what was actually the most candid version of this character, this person who is moving through the world otherwise with a mask, was to be inside of their head. So that was why I chose first person, because I was writing, trying to depict the consciousness of a Black woman. Yeah.
There's a debate going on in the chat over whether Rebecca, the wife, and Edie, the mistress, were ever going to hook up, could you ask Raven whether she ever considered a pact for them?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, I am, there was at some point like a note in my draft of how to make that happen. But ultimately, I do think that, you know, the relationship they had, the tension and sort of like erotic, like the erotic tension that exists between them, it exists that way because it can't be acted on, right? It won't be acted on. And part of it is it's generative and fertile in the way that they're, you know, that relationship enables Edie's, you know, Edie's art, Edie's craft. And that to me is, I mean, what a thing to say, but I was going to say that to me is a sexual thing. It's reproduction. And so I think, you know, absolutely, as I was writing this, you know, writing this book, I was writing toward that tension. I enjoyed it myself, and wanted it myself, but it felt more true, to let that sort of rest and on like the art that is made and generated out of that union.
Lily wants to know, why does Edie have such a difficult time doing a self-portrait? She seems so aware.
Oh, well, she has a difficult time for a couple reasons. One reason is that she does not, has not previously had the means or the time to carve out time to like really to tackle her craft. And so that's a question of the privilege that is required in order to practice art, or to make anything. And the other reason is that is the performance aspect, is that she has lived behind this mask for so long and has taken up with the demands of performance so frequently that when it comes time for her to replicate her form onto the canvas, that distorts, she is unknowable to herself. She has been distorted by this sort of mandate for performance. And when she begins to break through, it is more that it is because she has been sort of plucked out of that environment that has necessitated that sort of that performance.
I have a question that I didn't get to. I'm jumping into the audience Q&A because I think it's an important one to talk about, is the violence between Eric and Edie. And that is very fraught when you talk about violence between white men and Black women, because there's historical implications of slave owners and overseers raping Black women, and of course, rape and act of violence. But for some people, that is a kink. That is something that is part of their sex life.
Yes.
As you were writing it, I'm curious about the balance, about what kind of questions you asked yourself, and did you ever have concerns about how it might be received? Absolutely.
I think it's funny because I don't usually, as I'm writing, think about that kind of thing. I mean, really, I don't think I could, because I don't think I would be able to write under that, you know, that pressure, I suppose. But I did, when it came to this, I absolutely did, more just because in writing, you know, a Black woman, I, in general, felt a responsibility to make sure that I was not, that she got to be human, and that she got to experience joy, and that her lot was not defined by the trauma that she experiences. So when it came to the sex, when it came to the violence that she invites sexually, I absolutely was concerned. But I thought it was most important for me, you know, she lives in this body that is subject in the public realm to violence, I wanted her to be able in the private realm to assert her sexual needs without judgment. Mm-hmm. Because I think, she's moving through life often with very little power, and in this private, sexually, I wanted her to be able to seize that power. And in a way, I feel like it feels like a contradiction because she is relinquishing power, but I think that she has invited that she has acquiesced to that. It sort of makes it different than if it were sort of this violence being enacted on her without her consent. But I do think that also there are parts of this book where you see her lean into that annihilation, and that too, it's, whether or not it's a kink, it absolutely is a kind of surrender. And I wanted that for her too. I wanted that sort of moment of smoothness. Like that's the word that came to my mind, but that is not the right word. But I wanted her to have that moment of surrender. I want her to depart from, the parts of this story that are brutal, that are hyperbolic. And in fact, I suppose it is brutal and hyperbolic, but I wanted to depict a Black woman asserting her sexual agency without pathology.
I just have this one comment is kind of awesome. The comment is, and let's note that Rebecca cuts up dead old men for a living. That's just the comment. Somebody goes, Rebecca clearly shot the neighbor's dog, didn't she? And this one is just sort of sweet. Why did you choose Maplewood as the New Jersey suburb?
I honestly, I just wanted to choose an area where, I think the flaneur was mentioned earlier, but I wanted to choose an area that she could technically wander around in, and that gave me some scenery to kind of help move her through space. But in general, I chose Jersey in general because I needed a different place for that second half of the book, for her to be removed from the brutality of the city to a place where there was quiet, and a place where she could finally begin to grapple with her craft in a real way.
Now, what's next for you? Are you writing? Are you painting? You're an artist as well.
I am writing. But I can't. I feel like I can't really talk about it yet because it's okay. I don't even know what it is. But I'm both writing and painting. I feel like when I cannot write, painting is generally what I do. So I've been painting a lot, and it's been a really nice. That's the bit of joy that has helped me kind of get up in the morning during this moment.
Now, do you paint for yourself, or do you paint with the hopes of a gallery show someday? Because that would be exciting.
It would be really exciting. But I honestly mostly paint for myself, though I will say that since the book came out, I've pretty much sold most of my stuff. Like a lot of the paintings that I maybe even moved to New York with are gone. And that's actually kind of a beautiful thing. That's a very surprising and beautiful thing.
Well, I want to say this, and I hope that no one gets upset when I say this. I'm glad that some things in 2020, I know it's been a hard year, but I'm really glad that some things in 2020 have worked out so beautifully for you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Raven Leilani, everybody, thank you so much for being with us. Everybody go read Luster. If you haven't read it, if you're listening to this on the radio and you haven't read it yet, definitely read it. Thank you so much for being with us, Raven.
Thank you.
So we started off, our theme of this was debut novels. We wanted to introduce you to someone whose debut album is upcoming, someone whose name you're all going to know very soon. Jensen McRae is a 23-year-old Los Angeles native. Her first album is scheduled to come out next year. It's already been described as a, quote, stunning debut in the making by her local public radio station, KCRW, which has praised her as having exposed lyricism and striking delivery. Tonight, she joins us, and we have 2 performances from Jensen. And get this, in the spirit of debuts, we're thrilled to share that Jensen is going to debut a song from the album with us tonight. The song has not been released anywhere just yet, but since it's hers to debut, I'll let her introduce it. Here's Jensen McCrae.
Hello, everyone. I guess the song that I'll be debuting tonight, the one that's not out, is called "My Ego Dies at the End," and I'm really excited for you guys to hear it. I'm not sure what else I should say about it.
Well, let's take a listen, and we can talk about it on the other side. Here's Jensen McCrae.
Hello, my name is Jensen McCrae. I'm super excited to be a part of this event. The first song that I'm going to be playing is "My Ego Dies at the End." It's a song that hardly anyone has ever heard, so this is very special, exclusive, really the start of something new. Cue High School Musical. But this is "My Ego Dies at the End," and it's about growing up and identity and losing yourself and trying to find it again. I think I lost something in the water. I tried to swim to it. I could not swim to it. Drowned in a dream that should have made me stronger. I tried to swim through it. I could not swim through it. Leave my body in the party early. Cry on the train, playing Justin Vernon. Such a long walk back to 30th. I have the dream again. I have the dream again. My ego dies at the end. It's ego death. I live the dream, I guess. Still don't know what it meant. Who am I? I've lost the thread. My ego dies at the end. I tried to cry for it. I could not cry for it. Sank down to search the bottom of the river. I tried to die for it. I could not die for it. Leave my body in the water early. Tried baptism, but it felt like burning. If I don't write about it, was it really worth it? I have the dream again. I have the dream again. My ego dies at the end. It's ego death. I live the dream, I guess. Still don't know what it meant. Body and my ego early. Kill it kind with a surgeon's mercy. Claim I put it out of its misery. I have the dream again. I have the dream again. My ego dies at the end. It's ego death. I live the dream, I guess. Still don't know what it meant. Who am I? I've lost the thread. My ego dies at the
We're back with Jensen McCrae. Jensen, that song, the title, My Ego Dies at the End. When did you write that?
I wrote that song in December of 2018, like in the midst of like writing my whole first album. Like it was a real flurry of writing at the time.
Well, when you were writing your album, did you have sort of an idea of what you wanted it to sound like? Or did you have a group of songs you thought, okay, I'm going to put them together and make them into a unit?
It was definitely a super exploratory process. I didn't have really any preconceived notions about it. The entire thing was produced by Rocky, my incredible producer, and it was us kind of like, we had just met like a couple months prior, and we were kind of exploring like our sonic relationship, I guess. And it was like, I would just go into the studio quite frequently and just see what happened. And very quickly, like we developed a sort of pattern and a cohesion to what we were making. And I think that My Ego Dies is a really good representation of that.
Sometimes when you start exploring new territory, you discover something about yourself or about the way you write or the way you create. What did you discover about you?
I definitely discovered that there is more to what I make than like simple imitation. Like I remember that I sent Rocky a playlist of songs whose production I admired and who I wanted to replicate. And he was not dismissive of it, but he was very like persistent about the fact that it need not sound like those songs. He was like, it needs to sound like you. It doesn't need to sound like all the artists that you like. So I realized that there's a lot more potential for my music than I realized. I thought that I needed to follow in the footsteps of other people, and I definitely still do. But I realized that I had like a lot more freedom than I thought, and that I could make things that I liked and that sounded good and that would appeal to other people without just replicating what other people were doing.
The first word you use to describe yourself in your Twitter bio is word girl. So we are a book club, so we zeroed in on the words. What does it mean to be a word girl?
Well, my mom called me that originally. I think she got it from somewhere else, but she was the one that originally termed me the word girl. And I have a lot of interest in writing outside of just songwriting. Like I want to be a novelist one day. I have poetry. I have screenplays and personal essays and all that sort of stuff. So I just really love words a lot. And like, that's really been the main driver behind my songwriting. I definitely love music as well. But for me, the reason that I do it is the storytelling aspect. And I cry about words all the time.
Well, you know, it's one of the things that's so interesting to hear you say that you want to write as well, novels, essays, because that is the thing that a lot of people have zeroed in as your superpower, as the thing that you just excel at, as creating words, creating stories, taking on serious topics, and somehow using the music to help the words take it even farther. I don't know, you're better at words than I am right now. When did you realize you had a knack for writing?
I was pretty young, I think. I learned to read pretty early, as I'm sure many people listening to this can relate. And I've literally been writing for as long as I can remember. Like I used to write on the walls and like on the upholstery of my mother's car, much to my parents' chagrin. I just loved the feeling of having a pen in my hand, and I just loved the way words and letters look. Like it's definitely an aesthetic thing. Like that was definitely how it began. I just like loved how it felt, and then I realized the power that words had, and I just became really obsessed with like figuring out the best way to say things. I'm also, one of the other words in my Twitter bio is crybaby. Like I'm very sensitive, and figuring out a way to convey like the depth and magnitude of my emotions has been like the primary driver of everything that I write.
There are some people that say that you're sort of Gen Z millennials. I think both groups would like to claim you. That, you know, there's a sort of acceptance of that things are kind of bleak occasionally. Is that something that you put into your writing? Do you believe in that? Do you take on that characteristic?
I definitely feel the bleakness. I was just thinking about this the other night. Like, so I was born in 1997, and I feel like the people of my like sub-generation, about like 95 to 98, are in this really unusual position of like, we weren't quite old enough to vote for Barack Obama. So for all of us, our first election was 2016. So we had like the coming of age in this incredibly hopeful era, but no agency. And then when we got agency, it became like imperative that we use it, otherwise the world would end. So we have this like really unique combination of like confidence and hope and optimism, but also like terror and rebellion. Like it's this very weird, frothy combo. And I feel like at the end of the day, like I am an optimist, even though like I am very sensitive, I'm very sad, call myself a sad girl. There's some little voice inside of me that is like pushing me to believe in the best possible outcome. And so I feel like I hope that comes through in my music a little bit, just like even through the darkness. Like I still think at the end of the day that it's going to be okay.
Jensen, when did you first take up music?
My parents played me a lot of really great music. Alicia Keys is like the reason that I got started, primarily because she was a mixed girl with braids and I was a mixed girl with braids. And I was like, I get it. Like we're on the same page. And my mom put me in piano lessons. Like, you know, every parent puts kids in piano lessons, but for me, it really stuck. And they also put me in musical theater because I was very shy as a child and they wanted me to break out of my shell. And while I'm no longer a theater kid, I'm definitely like a recovering theater kid.
We had sort of a group agreement in the Get Lit universe that I know you want to sound like yourself, but that there's this Tracy Chapman-esque sensibility about your music. Who are some of your influences?
I have definitely gotten the Tracy Chapman comparison quite a bit. I got that low voice, got the acoustic guitar, the storytelling, it's all there. Alicia Keys, other than her, is like one of the early ones. James Taylor, Carole King, Stevie Wonder, those were really important to me as a child. Like that's what my mom played in the car. And I also really love Sarah Bareilles. I love Bon Iver, John Mayer, Corinne Bailey Rae. Those are all artists that shaped my writing and my listening habits like into adolescence and early adulthood for sure.
Now in college, you studied music, right?
Yes, I was a popular music major at USC and I graduated a year ago.
Do you use what you learned in academia?
I use a little bit of it. I would say like the primary benefit of going to music school is just being surrounded by musicians. Like I grew up in Los Angeles and I went to an incredibly academic private high school and there wasn't a ton of creative output happening there. And people thought it was very weird that I was going to music school. And so for me, just having that environment was a real change of pace and it caused like a huge level of improvement that I don't think would have happened if I just like tried to strike out on my own. Like being in that very concentrated environment of ambitious musicians and having structured output requirements was really, really helpful for me, more so than like specific things that I learned in the classroom.
Earlier this year, you released an acoustic single called The Plague, obviously about the pandemic and the state of the world. Have you found, I was talking to, I'm going to name drop Bootsy Collins, and he was saying that, sort of a weird, tiny, tiny little silver lining of being home and isolated was he found himself being more creative or having the space to be creative because there weren't any distractions. I'm curious if you had that experience.
I would say that my creative output was pretty similar to what it would have been otherwise. Like I just write very reflexively, like it's not so much that I have to force myself to do it. Like it just sort of happens without me really meaning to do it. And so definitely my creative output was similar to previous years, like in the same time frame. But the nature of it changed. Like I was obviously forced to write about things that I had never written about before. And with the pandemic sort of dovetailing into the civil rights movement, like that was also an opportunity for me to write about race in a way that I hadn't interrogated maybe as meaningfully previously. But I also was still writing about mental health and unrequited love, which are like my two favorite topics. But yeah, I mean, definitely there was nothing else. There were not really distractions other than like the state of the world. Like there was less of a to-do list distraction over the course of the day, so that there was definitely more time to write. And I also, got more into recording because I didn't have access to studio space. So that was another sort of creative flourish, was me learning how to produce myself a little bit.
Jensen, where are you in the process of creating your debut album?
So the album is done. It's just a matter of figuring out like when and how it's going to come out. As a lot of artists have experienced, and I'm sure a lot of people in the literary world as well, like things got pushed back this year. And so we're waiting it out, trying to see, a strategy for 2021, like the best way to get it out in the world. And just, we're really proud of it. I'm really, really happy with it. And the thing that we always talk about is just making sure that it gets the release that the songs deserve. And so we're just trying to figure out the best way to do that.
That's so exciting that you're happy about it. You're so enthused about it.
I really, really love it. There's mostly songs that I worked on like just with Rocky towards like the middle end of my senior year of college, but there's a few songs from prior to that. The oldest song on the album is one that I wrote when I was 19. So it's really cool to like, it shows like the entire journey of my like late teens, early 20s, which is really great.
So the song we're going to hear is called White Boy, which is a single that you released at the end of last year. What are you exploring in this song?
Well, I think it's interesting what Raven was talking about before about like writing towards discomfort and having like a turning point of being able to be vulnerable in one's own writing, because White Boy is that for me. I wrote it my junior year of college, and it was like the first song that I wrote that sort of took me by surprise having written it. It's a topic that I had been afraid of broaching my whole life, this notion of being one of very few Black and brown women in these predominantly white spaces and navigating social interaction with white people, specifically white men, and trying to like wonder what the racial undertones were. And I always thought that it was an alienating and uncomfortable topic to write about and that no one would want to hear about it. And so when I wrote the song, I didn't play it for many, many months. But then the way in which that I met my current team, like that song was the song that drove them to want to work with me, because it was something that I don't think has ever been written about before in music. Like to my knowledge, I don't know any other songs that broach that topic. And I think it's the song like that only I could have written. Like I love all of my songs and I'm very proud of them, but that one is sort of the one that represented a real turning point in me writing music from my distinct voice. And yeah, I was very proud of that.
Did it take courage?
It took immense courage. I was really scared to play it for people. And like, I remember right before it came out, every time I release music, I have a small moment of panic where I can't believe I'm being this vulnerable in public. But White Boy, it's like a whole different ballgame. Like one of the lines in the second verse is trance state, you're hypnotic, twirl my hair, watch my voice jump the octave. I don't like who I am for you, white boy. It's like me confessing to my own like shortcomings, my own insecurities, and just embarrassing moments. And I've now come to terms with the fact that like it's important to tell that part of my life. Like that was definitely a feeling that I had like when I was growing up, and it's important to narrate that. And also to provide other Black and brown people who've experienced the same thing, like some catharsis and some validation. Like, even though it's scary for me to say, like the response that I get is always worth it.
Well, first of all, cheers to you. Thank you so much for being part of our Get Lit with All of It book club. We look so forward to your debut album. I hope when it comes out, you'll come back and be on the radio show.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
This is White Boy from Jensen McCrae.
Now my hair smells like smoke. Something's burning. I don't know what it is. I won't laugh at your dumbass jokes, white boy. I don't owe you anything. I am learning not to sing for you. Your cage is not Maya Angelou's, white boy. But you still got a grip on me. Sword to hilt, hands of God, bring me to my knees. If I stand down, if I believe, if I am what you ask me to be, what, boy, what will you make of me? Passion play, almost biblical. White girl arrives, I turn invisible. I don't like who I am to you, white boy. Trance state. voice jump the octave. I don't like who I am for you, white boy. But you still got a grip on me. Sword to hilt, hand of God, bring me to my knees. If I stand down, if I believe, if I am what you ask me to be, what, boy, what will you make of me? But you still got a grip on me. Sword to hilt, hand of God, bring me to my knees. If I stand down, if I bleed, if I am what you ask me to be, what, boy, what will you make of me? What will you make of me? What will you make of me?
Thanks so much to Jensen McRae for those beautiful performances, and to Ivy Mix for our Luster cocktail. And of course, a huge thanks to Raven Leilani, the author of Luster. We do want to give a shout out to our friends at the New York Public Library, especially Tony Marks, Andrew Medlar, and Brian Bannon for getting those e-copies into your hands every month. Big thanks to the Green Space, our team that makes this whole virtual thing happen. Jennifer, Sachi, Cam, Ricardo, and David. And thanks to the All of It producers who put this on. That would be Megan Ryan, Jordan Love, and musical guru Simon Close. Now, on to our November book club selection. I get to drink now. Our author this month is a Pulitzer Prize finalist and the recipient of a Library of Congress Prize for American Fiction. Her novel, The Roundhouse, won the National Book Award for Fiction, and she was named one of the greatest living American writers by The Guardian. That's right, next month, our author is Louise Erdrich. We're going to be reading her latest book, the New York Times best-selling novel, The Night Watchman. The novel is based on the true story of Louise's grandfather, a Chippewa man and council member who fought a 1953 congressional initiative to remove Indigenous Americans from their land. The New York Times says The Night Watchman is, quote, magisterial epic, a magisterial epic that feels like a call to arms, a call to humanity, a banquet prepared for us by hungry people. You're going to love it. Head to wnyc.org/getlit to find out how to borrow your e-copy, courtesy of the New York Public Library. And then mark your calendars. We're giving you some extra time to read this one with the holidays and everything. December 2nd. That's when we'll be speaking with Louise and a special musical guest to be announced. Till then, grab your copy. Happy reading. A toast to you for joining us. Thanks. We appreciate it. Everybody have a good night.